All right, well, welcome everybody to this evening's session. Thank you for being prompt and on time. We're going to keep to our side of the schedule, so we're relying on you to guide yourself in accordance with these great seventh ray rhythms which are upon us today. So, after Tuya's extraordinary introduction of Helena and me, I was trying to think, what do I say about Corinne, and I got to divide Corinne and Gordon a bit. This is difficult, but I would say just a few things here. I first came across Corinne and Gordon, you may not remember this, back in, I think it was 89, at the Sheraton, it was a Sheraton conference of the University 7 Rays. And you guys were making presentations, and I said, this is extraordinary what they're talking about. It's stuff that I'm interested in, stuff that I love, So that began a kind of, how would I say, an affinity and a joint collaboration to some degree anyway, in terms of the work that they were doing. Now, this, as you know, Corinne, I'll divide it in half now and just speak about her, is she and Gordon, can't do it. Okay, but anyway, she is she's written 2 books, all right, this is the way, and is writing another book right now, but the first book, Builders of the Dawn, came out of her and their experience at the Findhorn community for a number of years, and I read that, it must have been 82, 83, I forget when it came out, but it was a marvelous book, which for me was again a sign of what is happening here on the planet in terms of seeding the planetary civilization. So that for me just hit the thing on the head. And then the book that came out on spiritual politics. If you haven't read the book, it's in the bookstore. This is a book for me, a bit like Marilyn Ferguson's book, Aquarian Conspiracy. This is about what is going on the planet today in politics, but other realms which we can all celebrate. So this is some wonderful writing. And I'm not sure if this is true, but Corinne is a driver on the writing of things. So this is you're dealing with a great author here. But also a co-founder of the Center for Visionary Leadership, which has got San Francisco now as a center, as well as Washington, D.C. And last time we talked in depth, you were part of Clinton's, or Gore's anyway, Sustainable Development Group. Yeah, so working in the White House area. So a lot of first-hand acquaintance with what goes on in Washington, D.C. So here's a person who, in my mind, really is in the middle of both thinking about and working with these great Christ energies, as well as acting in terms of spiritual activism, making things happen. So her topic tonight is about money and as a spiritual asset. So we are delighted and honored to have Corinne join us. Thank you. Corinne.
Thank you.
Oh, great.
All right, great. Great, well, it's lovely to be here. And I want to just start with a little meditation for a moment. So if you'd like to just center yourself, tune into your heart. And as we feel together in the radiant heart of the Christ, and reaffirm our dedication to the work of the great masters, the work of the Christ, and open our hearts to greater love, that it may flow to all of our colleagues and co-workers, both here and around the world. And let us each reflect on our relationship to money. To money. And ask that our discussion this evening bring forth the highest good to help clarify ideas, to rekindle our commitment to the work, and help us be channels for the great golden stream of energy that can be money passing into the hands of the forces of light for all the good work that needs to be strengthened in the world. Thank you. So here we are talking about money at a spiritual conference and talking about how it can aid the work of the Christ and how it can aid in building the new civilization, because that is our work. And it's very interesting for me because, as you know, I've written this book, Gordon and I together, on spiritual politics. We do courses on the science of the soul, teaching the Alice Bailey work and bridging it to people in both California and Washington, around the country, and all over Europe and many other places. And a lot of our work is to do this bridging work and to take some of these ideas and introduce them to people who are new to it. And a lot particularly focused on how do we bring these ideas into politics. And we spent 13 years in Washington, D.C., which was a real spiritual hardship assignment. You know, people say, whoa, I'm glad it's you and not me who's there. But and we left just about 4 years ago. We were guided to come back to California. And it's interesting, though, I keep being asked to talk about money, even though we have, you know, over a dozen themes of seminars that Gordon and I do. And this keeps coming up to say more about money. And I've been really struck over the years by doing the Sunday meditations on, you know, meditating on money and reflecting on my own relationship to it, redirecting it, seeing how it can be a golden stream of energy passing into the hands of the forces of light from the materialistic forces that are holding on to it just for their own purposes. And so because I've been focusing on this a lot, and we started doing some seminars and decided to call it Money as a Spiritual Asset, because that comes right from DK's work. And it's just always struck me, a spiritual asset, money as a spiritual asset. But it's been a challenge for me, you know, it's like I'm learning more about money as I give these seminars and as my own life changes in terms of the work around money. And it's interesting because I think I started off, you know, certainly past lives, as maybe many of you have experienced, in ashrams or monasteries, where, you know, we take a vow of obedience and often poverty. So, you know, I came into this life probably thinking money is something that I need to avoid, you know, only greedy people go after it, look what the problems it's caused in the world, you know, all these sort of negative thought forms, many different things. So I've had to work on some of these issues, and I want to talk about this tonight. But I also have, in my spiritual life, been guided, Gordon and I, back in 1978, after we lived at Finhorn in Scotland, we were guided to start a spiritual community in Massachusetts. And we were guided to buy, you know, this large acres, 86 acres at the time. But we didn't have much money. You know, okay, we're going to need some help here. And what happened was we were guided to go to this conference, and we spoke to several people. Well, the first thing that happened, actually, we went to a bank. And we said, we need to take out a loan. And they said, well, write down, what is your address? You know, you fill out this form. And we said, well, we don't really have an actual permanent address right now. We're traveling around the country doing seminars. This was in 1978 when not a lot of people were on the circuit doing these kind of new consciousness seminars. And so we talked about individual and planetary transformation. And so, we didn't have a permanent address. And I said, well, what do you do for a living? What's your income? And we kind of described, we give seminars. And they just kind of laughed at us. And basically, we thought, okay, we're going to have to figure out something else here. Then we went to a conference, and we just put out, that we were needing some financial support to do the kind of work, to buy this land, to start a spiritual community. And people guided us to different people to talk to. And amazingly, 4 out of 5 of the people we talked to said yes. And we went, wow, we're getting some help here. And somebody even called us back and offered us more money. And we thought, oh, wow, okay, we have faith. We get this guidance. We have faith. This is cool. It's all working, And so we went ahead and bought the land, and people started coming. And, and the man who owned the land told us that he would himself give us a mortgage at half the going rate. And he sold the property for half of what he could probably get for it because he liked us. And he really didn't want to, put it out, go through regular real estate agents and so on. And he was a wonderful old man and a former police chief, a really sweet man. Didn't quite understand what we were doing, but so we started this community and people started coming. And, okay, we had the money for the down payment. And after, a few months, we started getting to a point that it was getting really tight financially. And, we'd meditate on it. And, okay, we have to have more faith, meditate, ask, all these things. And still it wasn't quite working. And meantime, the mortgage is getting due in a couple of days. And we're going, oh, my God, what are we going to do? And what was interesting is that we had to just, at that point, sit down with each other and work through some of the conflicts that were in the group, because we realized that there were some conflicts. There was creating disharmony and was not attracting the funds that we needed. And the interesting thing was, after we had that meeting, this woman came to visit. We had lots of visitors, and this particular visitor said, I was meaning to come see you 6 months ago or whatever, 4 months ago, but I just never got around to it. And she said, I was wanting to send you this donation. She says, here it is. Well, it turned out it was almost the exact amount for the mortgage, a few dollars over. And we thought, isn't this interesting? Because we had to do the inner work ourselves in order to attract the money. It was like, it wasn't just faith, it was like our group consciousness had to solidify, had to work through the issues that had come up, and to create a stronger presence as a group, because we were starting a spiritual community, actually living on the land, building buildings, starting gardens, governing ourselves. We had self-governance by consensus, and very in-depth. There's nothing like living in community to learn a lot of major lessons on working out your spiritual issues, because you can have these great ideals, but it's actually living together that a lot of things come up and you've got to work through these things. So that was a many-year process. And Sirius, we named it after the star Sirius. We were guided to use that name. And it's still going strong today in Massachusetts. Gordon's brother and some of his family is still there. There's over 40 people still living on the land. They've developed this beautiful, sustainable community. They do a lot of environmental. They have a windmill, composting toilets, solar energy, very practical, hands-on demonstration. Because after living at Finhorn for many years, we had seen the importance in this cycle of the seventh ray energy of bringing our spiritual ideals right into the physical plane, into matter. So that was some interesting lessons, and I feel like that whole experience with faith and learning that it can work and seeing what is also needed in a practical, grounded way. Now, there was another thing that was really funny, interesting for us, was that it's also like you have to manage your money well. It isn't enough to just keep manifesting it and the money's pouring in. You have to pay attention, keep the books well, stay really grounded with that. That was another important lesson. And it was interesting because as I started the last couple of years doing these talks on money, I was invited to speak to a group, a large kind of new thought, new consciousness group that had recently gone through a whole experience of expansion, over-expanding the form, and not keeping track well of the money, and some mismanagement. And the whole thing collapsed. They had beautiful properties and all these things. And it was just devastating to the members. And it's what I realized is they were teaching people about how to draw money to you. You know, affirmations, prosperity consciousness. I deserve to be rich. I deserve to have all these things. But they weren't teaching people enough about service and about how to manage the money well and pay attention. And actually somebody's serving some jail time over this. It was a big issue. So I was invited into the middle of this to talk about these issues. I went, whoa, this is really going into the fire. But the thing that kind of prepared me for it was my experience at Findhorn. Because when we were living there, and this was like the late 70s, Findhorn also had gotten into this expansion and manifesting and building more buildings, and just really, the form was really growing fast. And the money wasn't coming in as quickly as everyone was hoping. And so Findhorn went through this real deep period of reflection and looking at the very practical side, realizing that sometimes people were looking to just a small group of leaders to make everything work, and they realized each person had to take more responsibility. We had to realize, and this is one of the key lessons, was that if you're going to expand the form, and in the West here, in our Western culture, it's so easy to expand the form. But if you're doing the spiritual work, you have to deepen the spiritual roots, or heighten them, or however you want to say it. That deep spiritual consciousness has to be strengthened if you want to go out horizontally. And that was, I think, a major lesson I've never forgotten. And, running a center in Washington, D.C., we were constantly faced with paying the bills, paying the salaries of the people we'd hired to work with us. And it's a challenge when you're doing this kind of cutting-edge work, spiritual ideas, and we were trying to bridge with a very professional community in Washington, D.C., and bring out new ideas to people. And so over the years, there's some things I've really learned, and we were amazed that somehow each month we made it work, And sometimes we'd get to that point again of, the rent's due or the salary, the payroll's due. And I have a great respect for businesses because, when you take on employees and you have a payroll to meet, it's really real world people's lives that you're dealing with. And that responsibility, I think, is a very important spiritual lesson. So for me, it was a very helpful process in working in that way, and I think we did amazingly well with that. And over the years, there's some other things that I wanted to share with you, what I've learned about money. And I feel like just some of the key things is that here we are talking about money, and yet we all have these ideas and thought forms based on kind of the way we grew up often and things that our parents said to us. You might think about what are some of those little sayings that people, when you were growing up, said to you, the kind of things like money doesn't grow on tree, or, what's some of the other ones? And we want to call out some of the things you remember from childhood, those kind of, the root of all evil, yeah. Penny saved is a penny earned. What was that one? The other one? Yeah, don't get something for nothing. Free lunch, there's no free lunch. There's just so many things, and we all got our own little aspect of it, some more positive, some very negative often that people have that we're carrying around from childhood. So I wanted to go and look at it from some different angles. So first of all, now here is one that a lot of us as spiritual people we resonate with this one a lot often. So let me just start here. A little higher, can you see that? They're sitting in the boardroom and, everything's going down. But on the positive side, money can't buy happiness, so who cares? So how many of us, we've got to learn that lesson too. You can have all the money in the world and still not be happy. And so many people in our society are working on that one. They think, just a little bit more and it's never enough, and you just keep, And to learn the detachment and the sense that, as they say, the best things in life are free. But it's also true in the work that we're doing, we do need, to rent facilities, buy, build buildings, publish books. All these things take money. So, something to keep in mind. And here's another one that a lot of us might feel comfortable with. And this is what's going on for a lot of people today. I'll read it in case the people in the back can't see it. We got these out of the Washington Post and the LA Times and so on, these cartoons. This one, business slow, investments whacked, career plans postponed, computer wormed, phone tapped, self-assurance damaged, travel scary, television depressing. And then he's thinking to himself, forced to appreciate the simple things in life against my will. This is the experience many people are having also these days. And the little guy down at the bottom says, who are you? Right. So every now and then you get these rather conscious cartoons in the paper. So let's look at what money is anyways. Okay, so what really is it? Because we project so many things on it. And basically, money is an agreement within a community for use as a medium of exchange. It's an agreement. That's basically what it is. And as we know, it's also concretized energy or prana, life force, concretized. Crystallized third ray energy, active intelligence. And as DK says, many of those with great intelligence and incredible one-pointed will are amazingly effective at crystallizing third ray energy and making money. It's quite a skill that many people have in our culture today. But, spirit and matter being two ends of one continuous spectrum, spirit vibrating at a higher rate, matter at a lower rate. So you can think of money as spirit vibrating at a lower frequency. I find that's helpful, is to think of money in this way, as spirit vibrating at a lower frequency. And interestingly enough, money is an energy that expresses through the sacral center, the sacral chakra, second chakra. It's very interesting. Sexuality and money are connected. And of course, the advertising people know this. This is how they sell everything. So it's like they realize some things there. And it's also, we can think of it as the building forces of the Divine Mother, the Mother energy, Divine Mother, expressing divine purpose, the Father's purpose expressed in the material world. This is the energy of the Mother, in a sense. And when I think of money in that way, it helps me see it in a more, I think, helpful way today. Because basically, money can manifest either as a wave of energy, a flow of energy, or as a particle. And we know from physics, you can focus on one or the other. But when it's a particle, a coin, a bill, or even the numbers in your checking account or your credit card or whatever, we can get very anxious about it. But if we think about it as a flow, it's more helpful. And if we think about it as a flow that needs to circulate, again, this can be a more helpful perspective. Now, one of the things that I find interesting about this divine purpose is that money and spirit is like the highest and the lowest meeting. It's a very seventh ray in the way we have to work with money. And to think about it in that way is like, okay, let's get down to the nitty-gritty, because a lot of times we do these seminars on visionary leadership and being a practical visionary. And a lot of times people have these wonderful visions, but then it's like, okay, how do we focus on the practical side of it? Some people are better at the vision. And, when we do these seminars, we say, are you needing more vision in your leadership or more leadership in your vision to make your vision manifest in the world? And so I think part of the issue here is that we want to think about bringing spirit down to earth and using money as a medium to express it in the world. And so if we're really going to build a new civilization, we need to think about this in a new way and bring together our spiritual ideals with the nitty-gritty part. Because when we're talking about the vision, and I've been in so many groups, everything's great, everybody's getting along, then suddenly you talk about money. How are we going to do this? And then all the feathers get ruffled. Then it's like when you ask people to put their money where their values are, where their ideals are, then often it's a different story. So I always say, when we'll look about this, money is a mirror. Money, is a mirror to help us see various issues in ourselves and what we value. So when I talk about money and this relationship to the Divine Mother, I came across this interesting thing. It turns out that in ancient Rome, the first money was minted in the temple of the goddess Juno. One of her aspects was the goddess Moneta, Moneta. I thought, wow, that's interesting. That's where we get the name from. So the first money being minted in the temple of the goddess, they saw it, at least initially, as a sacred act, as creating this medium of exchange, this agreement within the community. And if we think of it again in a sacred way, I think it really helps a lot. So, it's also the ancient alchemists, the work of transmuting lead into gold. Well, I think today we have to take gold and transmute it, or we have to take what gold, we don't have, our money isn't even really backed by gold now, but we have to take money and transmute it into a higher frequency, into a stream of golden substance, as DK says, by dedicating its purpose. And, seeing it as a way to strengthen the work of the new group of world servers, as we've been talking about here today, and preparing for the externalization of the masters and the return of Christ. So what is our intention? What is our spiritual responsibility with the money that passes through our hands? So we have to regenerate money. There has to be a regeneration of money. As DK says, this is interesting, that if there must be a regeneration of money and changing of humanity's attitude towards it, because if not, he says, money will vanish off of the earth. I thought that was very interesting. And I'll get another quote where he talks about barter, returning to barter. So, the money is often the cause of suffering for people. The desire for money based on fear, it's like desire or fear of lack of money. Also, the suffering comes from the misuse of money. Money based on a lack of connection to the true self. We're trying to have money do all these things for us, make us more attractive, get us a big car, a big house to impress people, all these things, when we're not feeling confident in ourselves, that, I'm sufficient in myself, who I am. I look to money to do all these things. This is such a problem in our society. So it's like this fear has to be overcome by a deep recognition of the unity of humanity, which will lead to the inevitable result of sharing. If we feel like someone was, Heidi, we were doing that beautiful talk today, wherever you were, I, you, we're one. If we see the sense of connection and the unity as a human family, then it's so much easier for our heart to be open and to share and to see money circulating, see it as a flow. But it's always such a challenge for us. So contacting our soul, being in soul consciousness, we are, the soul is wise and loving and always this sense of connection to humanity. So we'll recognize that money is a tool to assist the spiritual evolution and unfoldment of humanity. Right attitudes toward money naturally unfold as the consciousness opens to the truth of the one life. So as our consciousness opens to this truth, it enables us to relate to money in a new way. This is one of the solutions. And the systems which control and manage money will change when people's consciousness changes. There's no escape from this truth. And all lesser solutions are doomed to failure. So this is really the basis of it. Now, money as a spiritual teacher. I love this quote. This is a good one. Listen, from DK. Let it ever be borne in mind that the sign of man's or woman's spiritual unfoldment lies in his or her ability to include in his consciousness not only the so-called spiritual values and the power to react to soul contact, but also to include the material values and to react divinely to the potencies which lie hidden from him in the custody of the other forms of divine life. In the custody of the other forms of divine life, found in the 3 subhuman kingdoms. This is from Esoteric Psychology 1, page 230, if you want to check it out. Very interesting in that, when I came across this quote, and I was researching money and all the, different books, I thought, wow, the material values. And it's very interesting if we see the world and the material world as a reflection for us, to understand the potencies hidden in the 3 subhuman kingdoms: mineral, plant, animal. And what is money? It's often mineral kingdom, the coins, or the bills in the plant kingdom. Now it's often electronic symbols that zip around the earth in nanoseconds on computers, which are another material plane expression. So to me, that was very interesting. And learning about material values and the laws of matter through conscious investment. Thinking about money is also how do we invest it consciously. This can be an opportunity to learn detachment from fear or greed. When you invest money, it's so interesting. I just see this mass, particularly astral consciousness, the stock market, when it goes up and down, and people either respond through fear or greed. And it's interesting because when one thing goes up, something else goes down, and it's all interrelated. It's such an interrelated whole system. The whole financial system of the planet, which is so increasingly interlocked, is this amazing, synergistic, whole systems thing. And it's just fascinating to observe it and to observe, the manipulations, and to observe how even the most brilliant economists and money managers aren't always accurate, So it's quite a study to see a practical application of synthesis and action is, for instance, how the more diversified your portfolio is, they'll say, then the safer the money is, because you have it in so many different things, and one thing goes down, another thing goes up. So, you manage your risks, you scatter it among so many different ways. And the more widely diversified, then the safer it usually is. And, it's just so interesting to talk to people in the financial realm and how they manage risk and how they think about these things and how they deal with their fears. And have found, some very interesting strategies on a real practical, intelligent, sort of focused way. So, we want to look at now, how is money a spiritual asset? So, is that high enough? Yeah, it's off. Which way? How do I go? This way. There you go. Within that letter. Okay, you can read it. Okay? Okay, so, money keeps us connected to meeting the true needs of others. It's like when you have to be in exchange, using money all the time, often you're more aware of what's going on, as you interact with people, give people money, receive money, you're in the flow. And it often is a way to keep connected to meeting that need, and thinking about how can I share what I have? How can I meet the need that's around me? And what's the most effective way? Not Band-Aids, but going to the deeper causes of the problems. And, offering a mirror for examining our values, our relationships, and so on. It's so interesting because, pull out your check stubs, pull out your credit card bill. And, aside from, the real necessities where you have to pay your mortgage or pay your rent or, put food on your table, your more discretionary income, what do you use your money for? Those of us who have a little more money to do anything with, or we're just scraping by. But often I find even people think, they don't have money for this and that, but then somehow they come up with it when they want something. It's like, okay, what does it tell us about our values? You know, what are we willing to put our money, often hard-earned, often, you know, we really value, what are we willing to do with it? And it tells us a lot about ourselves, and it tells us a lot about our relationships. So it's like, you know, and on just a very practical level, it can assist people's spiritual development by enabling us to buy books, go to courses, you know, when you want to expand your work, you know, for staff, for tools, for buildings, you know, to make it more effective, time for spiritual practice, retreats. You know, money, as we know, can be very helpful just in our own spiritual development. But it's also a precondition, the circulation of money, and particularly us as disciples, how we're using money, what we're doing with it, as a precondition for the reappearance. So it's like, how can we use money most effectively? How can we share it more widely? How can we be more conscious in our use of it? How can we attract more so we have more to give? Okay. So we want to think about why spiritual people particularly have money problems. Why is it higher? Okay. You know, I have hardly no fifth ray, so you notice I have this simple technology. And after this morning, I thought, oh, I'm so glad I just brought overheads, you know. I can handle it. I can move it around. I can maybe adjust this, you know. I can deal with it. Okay. So, belief that spirit and matter are separate and that money is evil, you know. A belief that spiritual work shouldn't require money. But as we know, there's so many things that we need money for, particularly in this Western culture that we're in. Often too much focus on abstract rather than practical levels. Now this one is interesting. Let me just share another very interesting quote, if I can find it here. Okay. I go past it already. Oh. Again from DK, why do truly spiritual workers seem unable to materialize what they need? The answer is a simple one. Those groups and workers who are closest to the spiritual ideal are as a house divided against itself. Their main interest is on abstract spiritual levels, and they have apparently not grasped the fact that the physical plane, when motivated from spiritual levels, is of equal importance. Equal importance. And this is in the Reappearance of the Christ. So it's like, you know, let's look at, are we getting too abstract, and maybe we need to focus our energy down, particularly with the seventh ray coming in and wanting to build a new civilization. Focus it down in practical ways. Often what happens is a lack of trust in ourselves that we're not going to misuse it. You know, just as I know, having experience of, you know, vows of poverty in past lives, I'm sure I've probably had a life, and many of you maybe can resonate with this, you know, having lots of money and misusing it. So part of our subconscious goes, oh, I'm not going to have money again because I'm going to blow it, you know, and I want to stay on a spiritual path this time, so I'm going to keep it from some distance from me. That resonate with anybody? Okay? So that's another part, you know, that's kind of these fears in our subconscious, you know, that we want to make sure that we stay on the path and we don't misuse it. So part of the work is learning to have working with our subconscious to learn trust again and saying, look, I've learned a lot of lessons. As long as I'm open to the feedback and I keep, you know, paying attention to the physical plane, paying attention to the feedback I get, being honest with myself, I'm going to get the feedback and I can stay on that straight and narrow razor's edge so that I can use it wisely, so I can do the work that's needed. Now, another one that's interesting is imbalances or blockages in the lower chakras, particularly the sacral chakra, because it relates to the expression of money, and the root chakra, related to survival issues and connection to the earth and groundedness. So it's very important to, you know, see this energy flow. You know, there's a whole system operating here. Okay, and so how can we balance things out? There may be a lack of training in how to rightly handle money. Maybe that's what we're needing is, more focus on how does money work? How can we manage it well? What do we need to learn? I found at Finhorn, there are people that are really good at figuring out all kinds of clever ways to manage the money and get other loans and leverage this and that. And they're always coming up with clever financial solutions. And then there are others who would say, just faith, let's meditate some more, let's pray some more. Some of us need a little more faith, and some of us need a little more practical knowledge and focus. So we can learn from each other. Some of us are better at one area, some in the other, and in any group, there can be a balance. We can balance each other out and learn from each other. So, and then I talked about the vow of poverty, and it's like, ask yourself if that resonates with you. Is there some past life vow that was very appropriate then, but maybe it's not today? And maybe it's time to have a little talk with your subconscious and say, look, it's time to release that. Today, what's needed in the work is a willingness to receive money, attract money, and use it rightly for the work. So it's like, and particularly depending on your particular purpose and dharma, some people need, and knowing that we can attract what's needed to fulfill our purpose. Because obviously some work, if you're going to be building buildings and doing a lot of form level stuff, you're going to need a lot of money. If you're traveling around the world and needing a lot to support your travel and your lectures, you're going to need more. If you have simpler expression, maybe you don't need as much. But having the faith to know you can attract what's needed to fulfill your purpose and to be willing to accept more spiritual responsibility. I found part of me, and this is also why people avoid leadership. I don't want the responsibility, and you push it away. You push away money, you would push away power because I'm afraid I'm going to misuse it, or, negative images from the past. But it's time to step up to the plate, my friends. All of us, I'm speaking to myself here. This has been, that's why I'm going out talking about visionary leadership. I got to learn to stand up and be a leader. So it's like, how can we keep, kind of pushing the envelope, each of us, with it? So rethinking our attitudes about money. Take this one off. What are some of the old attitudes that need to be transformed? Well, the personality is a consumer. It's always wanting to take in more. The soul is a generator of energy. So if we're feeling lack or we're feeling fear and worry, we're in our personality. The soul is always feeling the sense of abundance and wants to find other outlets and other ways to share the energy. And, it's kind of like, that old fairy tale archetype of the dragon hoarding the gold, and the hero comes and slays the dragon. It's slaying the dragon of greed and desire. But it's also kind of releasing this energy, learning to not hoard, but circulate it. So, knowing that we can also, do well by doing good. If you do good, more money is going to come to you. To know that that is the way the universe can work. And I'm going to talk about some of the businesses that have this kind of consciousness. So, how to attract money? First, I'm going to start with just some of the things DK has said about it. So, again, in the teachings, right thought, as we know, our attitudes need to be transformed, aligning with a higher purpose, using positive affirmations, right thinking, right meditation. And a lot of us work with this quite a bit. But also right love, that everybody's emphasizing here so much. It's like love is the attractive force. It's the force that connects us to each other. It connects us with the need in the world. We open our hearts and we want to give. It's not like a struggle. It's like, of course, So it's this sense of right love and the right technique. We act both from faith and yet also knowing how the law works, the laws of the universe. That knowing is key. And DK says, need, love, and magnetic power, when present at the same time, will attract the money. Need, love, and magnetic power. Okay. Now, some of the other just real practical things, and again, some of these you may know, but I find the New Thought literature is very good at some of this. Practical ways, clearing out our fears, desires, subconscious attitudes. Here's some really neat ones. Releasing resentments towards the wealthy. This is one I had to work on. It's like, oh, these wealthy people, they should give to us, and we're such a good cause, such good spiritual work, Any of those demands, any of those resentments block the flow. It's like we have to release that. And it's very, as we get to know people that are wealthy and generous, it's so inspiring. It's like, that's so important because we need these models of people that, and I love the Ted Turner thing, challenging, all these wealthy people to how much can we give away? Let's keep score by how much we give away rather than how much we make. One person, how much can you even enjoy of how much you made? So how can we give away more? And let's see about that. Paying off debts, because debts indicate how much we've taken from life rather than given. So that was another one I had to deal with. I had debts when I first came to Findhorn, and I knew I was supposed to stay there, but I had to work on realizing a debt is something I have to pay off, and I had to commit myself to doing whatever was needed to pay off the debt before I could stay there. And once I'd made that inner shift and willing to do, administrative work in an office, which at that time I hated, money started coming to me to be there, to stay at Findhorn. And that was my first realization of that. Learning to appreciate and bless money. And let me put that up right now, actually. It's a beautiful little blessing here. And being generous, it fills our karmic bank account. So with the money that passes through our hands, we can say, may this money be blessed. It is a symbol of divine substance and energy. May it be redeemed from every impure influence, from every attachment and craving. I appreciate it and keep it as a divine gift. I shall use it only for good and appropriate purposes. In using it, I again bless it and give thanks for it. That's from Sundal House, the center in England, probably from, I don't know where it came from originally, but Assagioli, Roberto Assagioli. So I find that's, the money that comes to us, when we pay for something, you give a person a dollar bill or, whatever country you're in, a euro, whatever it might be, a yen, is blessing the money as you give it. Just trying to remember that as we pass it on. So economic sharing is one of the preconditions for the Christ return. Sharing to all parts of the whole is very key. And DK says initiates of the fourth degree are competently preparing to institute later those newer techniques and modes of financial interplay which will supersede the present disastrous methods. They will inaugurate a system of barter and exchange, of which modern money is the travestied symbol. It will supersede big business and private enterprise. I found, whoa, that's interesting. I wonder when that's going to happen. This is from the externalization. So with this incoming seventh ray and this greater relationship between spirit and money and matter and money, money is beginning to flow more fully guided by spiritually motivated individuals that want to see money serve a spiritual purpose and create the new forms. So I want to talk about some of the seventh ray expressions that we're seeing in the world today. And Helena and Sheldon in their presentation this afternoon, it was so wonderful because you were talking about some of the similar things that I also was wanting to talk about this evening. But it's like, there's so much going on in the world today in a real practical way. It's like the business ashram. We have to talk about the business ashram. The people working with finance are really beginning to externalize and come out into the world, and amazing, wonderful, inspiring work is being done. Now, first of all, with just philanthropic giving, we're all asked to give, to change consciousness, particularly tithing to spiritual work and educational work. Work that changes consciousness is, of course, more causal level. So DK emphasizes the importance of that, working with consciousness. And another aspect that's been very key is socially responsible investing for social change. We've got to also look at, if you have money invested, what is your money doing? A lot of people were doing good work politically, and then they weren't paying attention to their money that was invested in these companies, polluting the environment, building weapons, tobacco, all these things. So it's like this movement that started over, 20 years ago? Gordon was very involved in the Social Investment Forum as one of the early directors. And helping people think about, how you put your values into your investments, into your money as well, through social screening. You can talk about things that you don't want your money invested in, tobacco, firearms, nuclear, environmental things, but also positive environmental pollution. Positive screens also, that you want to support companies that are finding the new environmental technologies, that are being sustainable, that are looking at ways to support their employees, the employee benefits, how they give back to the community, through volunteer work, through donations to the community, all of these ways in the social screens. And there's so many new exciting things going on. Community development banks. You can put your money in these banks that are FIDC in this country, for those in the United States, guaranteed by our government, have as good a rate of return as regular banks, but they go into poor communities to do community development within these poor communities, like South Shore Bank of Chicago, and there's a Calvert Fund, and Pacific Shore, and so on. And these monies circulate the money in poor communities, but they're very dependable, and in terms of the guarantees with them. There is microfinance, which is making small loans. It started in the third world with the Grameen Bank and things like Finca in South America, Women's World Banking, many others, giving small micro loans. Sometimes, to say groups of women in the third world, they give them $50 US money. In India, it would be an incredible amount. And they give it to a group of, say, 5 women. And they give it to one woman to start her business, and the group would be support for her to help her develop her business and pay back the money, because once the first person paid it back, the second person in the group could then be eligible for a loan. And they have like 99.9% payback rate from the poorest of poor with these funds. It's incredible. Now it's just grown hugely with this microfinance approaches. And there's the stakeholder capitalism that you talked about this afternoon, how think about capitalism as not just profit for the shareholders, but think about all the stakeholders, the employees, the distributors, the, what do they call them, the people that provide the products for you and so on, your suppliers, thank you, and the community, and, bring in all of them to the table. Think about it, how your business can benefit all, keeping a balance. And there's wonderful examples of this where, things like Interface Carpets, because they wanted to protect the environment and see what they could do. Ray Anderson, the CEO, one of the most inspiring stories, we had him speak at a conference we organized, and he said, look, it was like reading The Ecology of Commerce, like a spear going into his heart, because he realized what his company was doing to pollute the earth. So he created, from the top down, started saying, look, we've got to create a more sustainable company. And their goal is zero pollution, zero waste. You don't buy a carpet, you rent a carpet. It's recycled when it wears out. You rent a carpet, rethinking so many different things. So all of these examples of shareholder activism, if you own shares in something, getting active, voting your values. The social entrepreneurship, you invest in companies because they have a social impact. Or venture philanthropy, that you donate to a group based on strategic decisions and leveraging how it's going to impact the problem that you want solved. It's not just giving away to the usual ways of doing things. It's being a lot more strategic in investments. And there's a whole huge spirit in business movement that is both from the top down, CEOs getting inspired and helping their employees become more conscious and bringing the values into the whole business through a clear sense of purpose and vision. And there's also from the grassroots up, from the staff, having brown bag lunches to discuss their spiritual values. And, you know, there's just so many companies that are having these prayer groups, meditation groups, talking about purpose and vision in business, talking about how you can appreciate your employees more and the employees as family. There's a huge movement going on. It's so inspiring because to me it's like seventh ray energy in practical example. And as well, socially responsible purchasing. You be conscious about what we're buying. When we spend money, let's buy from companies that are more socially conscious. Let's think about supporting the businesses that are triple bottom line, which is not just profit, a single bottom line, but thinking about people, thinking about the planet, thinking about profit. You know, it's like the economic, social, and environmental have to work together. And there's all kinds of wonderful resources on this. Co-op America, Shopping for a Better World, you know, rates a lot of the businesses. There is socialinvest.org, which a lot of resources on social investment. There are so many wonderful examples out there. I'm always reading these magazines on, you know, Green Money, Ode magazine, Yes magazine, Utne Reader, that give examples of these seventh ray new businesses, new practical, what is enlightenment, the story they did last time. So all of these are really key examples. And to me, it's like, how can we, you know, support the work of people that are doing this incredible, inspirational work? And I'd like to just close with thinking about this right circulation of money. And if those of you who if you want to just pull out, if any of you have a dollar bill in your wallet or in your pocket, I want to just share with you some amazing symbols on this bill. And those of you from other countries and other currencies, you might want to examine your currencies and see what you can discover. But there are esoteric symbols on the dollar bill, and if I find when I use it, I want to use it with that consciousness of Anuit Coeptus above the pyramid there. God favored our undertakings. Novus Order Seclorum, new order of the ages. Right? In God we trust, we have in the United States on all of our money. And you know, the all-seeing eye of God above the pyramid, the four-sided pyramid of materialistic life. The capstone is missing. You know, there's the radiant eye of God above the pyramid. And we talked to Mary Ellen Withrow, who a few years ago was the treasurer of the U.S., and we did a seminar, and she was very interested in all this spiritual symbolism, and they started redoing some of the currency. And we kept saying to her, please don't change the symbols on the dollar bill. Here's what they all mean. And, you know, many people have been, you know, lobbied our government to keep these esoteric symbols that our founding fathers and mothers understood. So, you know, we can think of money in a new way, and understanding the symbols in it helps us in doing this blessing, is to realize that there's some consciousness that some have had around currency and money. And so I think if we think about money as supporting the work of the Christ, supporting the spiritual work, and dedicating this money to good purposes, and think about how we can, I want to challenge you, each of us. I want to challenge myself. How can I give more, stretch myself, dedicate this money, you know, doing this meditation every Sunday on the circulation of money, seeing it pass out of the hands of the forces of darkness into the forces of light, you know, the materialistic forces. How can we see it as this golden flow of energy? And what can we do? What is our part? So, and I challenge you, those of you in the audience who are speakers, how can we start bridging and bring out these ideas, the teachings, to new audiences? We're preaching to the choir here. We're talking to each other. It's hard going out there and talking to people that, don't come from a similar path. But how can we translate and bridge and communicate to people and bring this kind of energy out in new ways and new ideas and new forms, and go out at least once a month and challenge ourselves in a new way to do that. Because I feel like, what is the part each of us can do with money? Of all the things I've said this evening, what is one thing that struck you, that you hadn't thought of before, or that maybe you need to be reminded of again, that you might think, how could I make this commitment this evening, during this conference, to rededicate myself to this work of externalizing the hierarchy, and each of us are part of that hierarchy. How can we step out more? How can we externalize and be more visible and be willing to say, here I am, I want to help. I want to step forward and be, shine my light rather than hide it in a bushel or only talk to certain people in certain groups. And how can we not only give more, but think about how to use money rightly and use it intelligently and educate ourselves about all the wonderful work going on out there so we can support each other and support the good work that's going on in the world. So this is my challenge to you, and God bless all of you for the work that you're doing. God bless all the groups and the wonderful work that each of you have brought here. It's been a delight to see so many old friends and to reconnect and to hear about the work and the new perspectives that so many are bringing. So thank you for those who organize it. God bless you all. Good evening.